Hi, listeners. Welcome to today's podcast. We're Henry and Sarah sharing unfiltered insights, lessons, and laughs from our startup journey to help you build, grow, and thrive as entrepreneurs. Today, we're diving deep into something that's been on our minds a lot lately. Startup culture.
Yeah, it's almost become this mythical thing, hasn't it?
Totally. Especially in the tech world, where it feels like everyone's chasing the next big unicorn. We've been poring over this article called Startup Culture, What Works, What's Overrated, and What's Toxic, and let me tell you, it's been eye-opening.
So this deep dive is all about separating fact from fiction.
Exactly.
We're going to unpack the good, the bad, and the ugly of startup culture so you can make informed decisions, whether you're thinking of joining a startup, launching your own, or just curious about what it's really like.
So let's start with the good stuff, the
Yeah.
things that make startup culture so alluring in the first place. One of the biggest draws is the agility and innovation that startups are known for. Think about how frustrating it is to deal with corporate red tape. You have an idea, but it takes forever to get it approved, and by then, the market might have already moved on.
Right. That's where startups shine. They can move fast and adapt quickly because they have smaller teams, less bureaucracy, and a fail fast, learn faster mentality.
Right.
A great example of this is how some companies take months to approve a simple feature change. In a startup, you might see that change implemented in a week, allowing for quicker learning and adaptation.
Yeah, that speed and flexibility can be incredibly motivating, especially when you're passionate about your work.
Absolutely.
And speaking of passion, that's another big perk of startup culture, the sense of empowerment and ownership that you get.
Totally. In a startup, you're not just a cog in a machine.
Right.
You have a real stake in the company's success, and your ideas are valued. This can be so empowering for employees, especially when you compare it to the corporate world, where it can often feel like you're just going through the motions.
It's like the difference between being a passenger on a cruise ship
Right.
and being part of the crew navigating a speedboat through uncharted waters.
Exactly.
You're right there in the action, making decisions that have a direct impact on the company's trajectory.
Right.
And let's not forget the amazing camaraderie you often find in startups. I mean, imagine being surrounded by talented people from different disciplines, all working together toward a common goal. That's the kind of energy you can find in a thriving startup.
Absolutely. Startups often have these close-knit, cross-functional teams where designers, developers, and marketers work together seamlessly.
Yeah.
It's not like those siloed departments you see in big corporations.
Right.
And because everyone is so invested in the company's success, there's a real sense of teamwork and shared purpose. You're not just colleagues, you're comrades in arms, battling it out in the trenches of the startup world. It's a unique experience that you don't find in many other work environments. But as with anything, there are downsides to startup culture.
Of course there are.
It's not all sunshine and rainbows.
Right. There are some aspects that are often overhyped, and we need to talk about them.
Definitely.
For example, open plan offices.
Oh, yeah.
They're often touted as these havens of collaboration, but let's be real. Have you ever tried to concentrate in a noisy coffee shop?
It's nearly impossible. And open plan offices can be just as bad. All that noise and those constant interruptions can make focused work incredibly difficult.
I've heard stories of people resorting to wearing noise-canceling headphones or working from home just to escape the chaos, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of an open plan office, doesn't it?
Exactly. It's ironic how something meant to encourage collaboration can actually hinder productivity.
Another thing that often gets overblown is the whole perks thing. Free lunches, ping pong tables, nap pods. Don't get me wrong, perks are nice. But they shouldn't be a substitute for fair pay, reasonable working hours, and a supportive work environment.
I completely agree. Those perks can be tempting, especially when you're first starting out, but it's essential to look at the bigger picture
Yeah.
and consider factors like compensation, growth opportunities, and company culture.
Because at the end of the day, you need to be able to pay your rent, have time for your personal life, and feel valued and respected at work. Perks can be a nice bonus, but they shouldn't be the main reason you choose to work at a startup. And sometimes it feels like those perks are used to distract you from the downsides, like the relentless hustle mentality that pervades so many startup cultures.
You've hit on a critical point. The constant pressure to hustle and work around the clock can take a toll on your well-being. It's like there's this unspoken expectation that you should be sacrificing your personal life for the sake of the company.
And that can be incredibly damaging, both physically and mentally.
The thing is, this hustle culture isn't just about working long hours. It's often tied to external pressures, particularly from venture capitalists.
You're right. Startups often operate on tight budgets, relying on funding rounds from venture capitalists. This can create pressure to grow quickly, sometimes at the expense of employee well-being.
Exactly. The founders are under immense pressure to deliver results, and that pressure trickles down to the employees.
Right.
It's a vicious cycle that can lead to burnout and disillusionment.
It makes you wonder if there's a way to build a successful startup without sacrificing the well-being of your team.
That's a great question, and one that we'll definitely explore further as we dive deeper into the more toxic aspects of startup culture. So we've talked about the allure of startup culture and some of the aspects that are often overhyped. But now let's dive into the dark side. The things that can make startup culture downright toxic.
Yeah, this is where things get real. And one of the biggest red flags is that hustle mentality we were just discussing. It's practically a badge of honor in some startup circles to brag about pulling all-nighters and surviving on caffeine and stress. It's like they're trying to outdo each other on who can push themselves to the brink of burnout.
Yeah, it's a dangerous game, and it sets a terrible precedent. It creates this expectation that you're not truly dedicated to the company unless you're sacrificing your health and well-being. And that can have serious consequences, leading to increased employee turnover, mental health issues, and even physical health problems.
I've heard stories of people having panic attacks, developing insomnia, and even ending up in the hospital because they were pushing themselves too hard. It's just not sustainable in the long run.
Exactly. Burnout doesn't benefit anyone, not the employees, not the company, and certainly not the founders. And yet, this toxic hustle culture persists. It's almost like it's baked into the DNA of some startups.
Another issue that often goes hand in hand with the hustle mentality is a lack of accountability. The move fast and break things philosophy, while intended to encourage innovation, can sometimes lead to cutting corners and neglecting ethical considerations. It's like they're so focused on speed and growth
Yeah.
that they forget about the importance of doing things the right way.
And when things inevitably go wrong, who ends up paying the price?
The employees, of course.
Yeah.
They're the ones left to clean up the mess, deal with the fallout, and face the consequences. It's a classic case of short-term gains leading to long-term pain. And speaking of long-term issues, let's talk about diversity and inclusion. How does startups measure up in that department?
Honestly, it's mixed bag. While many startups claim to value diversity, the reality often falls short.
The article we've been discussing points out that startups often hire within their existing networks, which perpetuates a lack of diversity in terms of gender, race, socioeconomic backgrounds, and even thought.
Right?
It's like they're creating these echo chambers where everyone looks alike, thinks alike, and comes from similar backgrounds.
Exactly. And that's not how you foster true innovation. You need diverse perspectives, different experiences, different voices at the table to challenge assumptions and come up with truly groundbreaking ideas.
It's not just about being politically correct or checking off boxes. It's about creating a more inclusive and equitable workplace that benefits everyone. And let's not forget about the impact on the company's bottom line.
Numerous studies have shown that diverse companies are more innovative, more profitable, and have higher employee satisfaction rates. So it's not just the right thing to do, it's also good for business.
And yet, so many startups struggle with diversity. Why is that?
Well, part of it might be unconscious bias. People tend to gravitate towards those who are similar to themselves. So if the founders and early employees all come from the same background, it's natural for them to hire people who fit that mold.
That makes sense. It's like that saying, birds of a feather flock together.
Exactly. But it's important to be aware of these biases and make a conscious effort to build a more diverse and inclusive team. And this leads us to another toxic element that can rear its ugly head in startup culture: unchecked egos, often associated with the founders.
Ah, yes, the infamous founder worship phenomenon.
Right.
Everyone reveres the founder as a genius visionary, and no one dares to question their decisions, even when those decisions are clearly misguided.
It creates this culture of fear and silence where constructive criticism is stifled and bad behavior goes unchallenged. And that can be incredibly damaging to the company's culture and long-term success.
Because let's be honest, even the most brilliant founders are human. They make mistakes, they have blind spots, and they need people around them who are willing to challenge them and hold them accountable.
Absolutely. Healthy leadership is not about being infallible. It's about being open to feedback, admitting when you're wrong, and surrounding yourself with people who will tell you the truth, even when it's difficult to hear.
So we've talked about a lot of heavy stuff. The hustle mentality, lack of accountability, diversity challenges, unchecked egos. It's enough to make you wonder if startup culture is even worth it.
That's a fair question. But before we throw the baby out with the bathwater, let's talk about some potential solutions. Some ways that startups can create a healthier and more sustainable work environment.
Because there are startups out there that are doing things right,
Exactly.
that are prioritizing their employees' well-being and building a culture of respect and inclusivity. So how do they do it? What are the secrets to creating a thriving startup culture that doesn't burn people out or compromise ethical values? It feels like the million-dollar question, right? How do you build a successful startup without falling into those toxic traps?
Well, it all starts with like a shift in mindset.
Yeah.
Instead of glorifying that hustle and prioritizing growth at all costs, startups need to focus on building a sustainable and ethical work environment where employees feel valued, supported, and empowered to do their best work.
It's about recognizing that your people are your most valuable asset, and that investing in their well-being is not just the right thing to do, it's also good for business.
Yeah.
After all, happy and healthy employees are more productive, more creative, and more likely to stick around for the long haul.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture where people can thrive, not just survive. And that means setting realistic expectations, encouraging work-life balance, and providing the support and resources employees need to manage stress and avoid burnout.
So instead of throwing money at superficial perks like ping pong tables and free snacks,
Right.
startups should be focusing on things like fair compensation, comprehensive benefits, flexible work arrangements, and professional development opportunities.
Exactly. It's about investing in the things that truly matter to employees and create a workplace where they feel valued and respected. And let's not forget about the importance of transparency and accountability. This is crucial for building trust, both within the company and with customers.
It's about being honest about the challenges,
Yeah.
admitting when mistakes are made, and taking steps to correct them. It's about creating a culture where people feel comfortable speaking up, sharing their ideas, and raising concerns without fear of retribution.
And when it comes to diversity and inclusion, it's not enough to just talk the talk. Startups need to walk the walk by implementing concrete measures to attract, recruit, and retain a diverse workforce.
This could involve things like expanding their recruiting efforts to reach a wider pool of candidates,
Hey,
providing unconscious bias training to hiring managers, and creating mentorship programs to support underrepresented employees.
and fostering a culture of inclusivity where everyone feels welcome, respected, and valued for their unique contributions. And that starts at the top, with leadership setting the tone and modeling inclusive behavior.
So what does this all mean for you, our listeners? Well, if you're thinking about joining a startup, don't be swayed by the hype. Look beyond the ping pong tables and free snacks and ask the tough questions.
What are the company's values? How do they treat their employees? What's the work-life balance like? Do your research, talk to current and former employees, and get a sense of the company culture before you make a decision.
And if you're building a startup, remember that your people are your most valuable asset. Invest in them. Create a culture that supports their well-being and empowers them to do their best work, and prioritize building a diverse and inclusive team.
Because ultimately, a healthy and sustainable startup culture is one where everyone thrives, not just the founders. It's about creating a company that you're proud to be a part of, one that makes a positive impact on the world.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into startup culture. We hope this episode has given you some food for thought and some actionable insights to help you navigate the exciting world of startups. Remember, it's not about chasing the hype or sacrificing your well-being for the sake of hustle. It's about building something meaningful and sustainable, something that benefits everyone involved. So keep learning, keep growing, and keep it real.